And we are live with the 24th episode of Absolute AppSec. I'm Ken Johnson at CK Tricky on Twitter, joined by my co-host Seth Law at Seth Law on Twitter. Seth, say hi.
Hey, everybody. Welcome once again.
And we're joined tonight by Jason White. I'm going to put it's Misfire, but I'm going to put his Twitter handle on our YouTube link here and shortly. And so a little bit of a background on Jason White. Jason's done AppSec consulting for some time now. He works for Aztec Consulting. He's spoken at AppSec EU. I know you were accepted. We were just talking about it. You were accepted to last con, but you actually injured yourself, so you never had to actually do that. Hopefully, you're able to make it out there because it's a great conference. He has spoken at B-Sides, a bunch of OWASP events. So, welcome, Jason. We appreciate you joining us tonight.
All right. Well, thank you guys for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's one of the nice things about like doing this podcast is we always get to like meet new people and expand our people that we get to talk to and opinions and viewpoints from within the AppSec-ish realm. So very happy to have you on.
Yeah. Welcome, Jason. Jason's actually local to me. Like we've had lunch a few times and we see each other around at local meetups, around the Salt Lake City area. So if anybody's listening in that area and wants to come find us, they can. I don't know. Ken, you're talking about like expanding the reach. Like just today we had, somebody that was piping up in the Slack channel, and I don't think either you or I actually knew who it was, right? So like it's kind of fun to see that the reach is outside of just the small circles that we've started with, and there's other people that are interested and willing to keep the conversation moving.
Yeah, and I was going to ask, are you guys going to, because since you're both in the Salt Lake area, are you both going to go to StCon?
I don't know about Seth. I've been looking at it and trying to decide because I moved here right around the time I think it just happened or was just about to happen or something, so I missed it. But it's been a crazy summer, so I've still got to look and see if I can do it.
Yeah, I know the call for volunteers is open right now, Jason.
Okay.
The call for papers or the CFP and the CFTs have closed. I submitted to it. We'll see. I've spoken at StCon for the last couple of years. Say again?
That didn't stop me with B-Sides.
Yeah.
I submitted
well,
late.
That's just it. They're always asking. Actually, now that I say that, I'm wrong, right? They closed it on July 1st, but then they reopened it. So I don't think they had enough so they are still looking for talks. So if anyone out there is interested, StConza, a local conference, been running for 10, 12, maybe even 15 years here in Utah. Pretty good representation of the the wider security community. It's not so application security focused. A lot of kind of academic background, right? So you get a lot of the professors and people that work at universities that attend it. So it's an interesting. It's definitely a fun conference to go to, and it runs all week, right? It's Monday through Friday.
Oh, so wow, that's long.
Yeah. So there's trainings, there's workshops, and everything.
Does it overlap with CactusCon? Because I'm like semi-tempted to fly out to Salt Lake and then go to Phoenix if we get accepted to CactusCon. I still haven't heard anything, so we'll see.
Yeah, it does. Actually, Friday is the only overlap day, right? So if you want to hit StCon, you can, most of the week, and then drop down for CactusCon on Friday, Saturday. Just kind of depends on, where you get accepted or what's going on, right?
I know I could crash on someone's couch out there.
No,
although I think it's too far away from where you live, right?
Yeah, it's down in like Provo, and I'm on the north end of Salt Lake City, so I've done that drive. It's a good hour and a half to get down there, especially in traffic. So
that'd be my couch in that case.
Yeah, he's closer.
I'm down closer to there.
Oh, so you guys aren't like neighbors? You don't go and toss the football on Sundays and barbecue?
Well, there are only what, like 100 people that live in Utah, right, Jason?
Yeah, it's just
right. So.
Well, I drove through some of those. I was driving through, so I went to just non-AppSec tangent here, but drove down to Arizona recently and drove back up. And we were driving through some of those towns, and one had population 247. The sign, the sign on the side of the road. So there are those towns. But,
so do they have to get a new sign? Like, do you do that once a year to put those signs up, or if somebody dies, do those get put? Or if someone's born, less morbid, someone's born.
I mean, I guess there's like a town painter that's what they're assigned to do, right? Is whenever there's a change, they go out.
They really need the magnet. It's probably steel anyway. Just do the magnets. That's what I would do.
Come on, we could automate that, right? Let's Internet of Things, like a nice Raspberry Pi up there. We could just,
Telnet admin.
There we go.
Exactly.
Easy to manage.
You could probably even count cars and people, and do it live, right?
Just expose an endpoint with a ticker plus or minus, up one, down one. I'm sure that wouldn't get tampered with.
No.
I don't think I mentioned this. Did I mention that you contributed to OWASP WebGoat when we did introductions?
You may or may not, but now you have. You've mentioned it now.
Perfect. Yeah. No, it's funny. So many frameworks are built off, or so many vulnerable apps are built off that whole like goat naming schema now. Right. I mean, like when I do Rails Go, and there's Node Goat and there's PyGoat and there's
Goat, iGoat. Yeah. There's PHP Goat. Yeah. Bruce Mayu, who is the official project lead on WebGoat, he refers to them as baby goats. So he's,
baby goats.
What's a baby goat?
Kid. Is it kid?
Kid. Yeah. There you go.
They're kids.
All the kids.
Yeah. Because WebGoat was kind of the original. I wasn't involved in the original version of WebGoat. It was kind of, since part of what we talk about here is your path to AppSec. That was on my path, kind of to credential myself in the help credential myself in the AppSec space, But hey, that's how easy it is. You just go write some vulnerable code, and you're credentialed in the AppSec space.
See, that's amazing, don't you think? Right? Hey, I just need to go purposely write something that's horrible.
Yeah, you just
people praise me for it, right? People follow me on Twitter. I
can put it on my resume. I write bad code, put it on my resume, and it's a win.
Yeah.
So obviously that's not what it really was.
Keyword being purposeful.
Purposeful.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So yeah, like while we're on that topic, then, since we always get into people's origin story, tell us about yours. How'd you get into, because it's always interesting the weird paths that people take to get into security. So share yours.
Well, I was born.
So all the way back, aren't we?
All the way back. Well, sometimes that's how far those things go back, right? Because I think part of it is your nature, right? Part of it is, I think, a lot of the security people, it comes down to, you're either sort of mischievous and tampering things, or you're a little paranoid and kind of going, well, what could, how could somebody break this, or how could somebody tamper it, right? What could the mischievous person do? But I think, when I was in grad school, my official degree is what we call instructional technology. And if you look at Seth's hat, that's where I went to school. Did you go to Utah State as well, Seth?
Yeah, that's where I went. I got a CS degree from there. So.
Yeah, that's right. I think we talked about that. But I did my grad work there at Utah State many years ago, and so in this process, I'll disclose a vulnerability they had once. And I did instructional technology, which is an education degree, but I was always the guy with like the distance learning projects, setting up servers and learning how to code things and playing with things. And I had already done some programming in my undergrad, just with computer-aided language instruction, because I did linguistics in undergrad. So as a grad student, I was teaching. I worked at what they called the Faculty Assistance Center for Teaching, FACT. Cute acronym.
Yes.
Because
I just think of Dwight Schrute when you say that. I mean, I don't know if anybody else
think of what?
Dwight Schrute.
I don't know.
Fact.
Dwight
From
Schrute.
The Office.
Fact.
Yeah.
Bears eat meats. Sorry.
Beats, Bears, Battlestar Galactica.
Nice. No, I've only watched some episodes.
So you worked at Fact, yeah.
I worked at Fact. Yes.
For a
the
fact.
Bears eat. No. Yeah. So anyway, part of that was I would teach. I taught advanced HTML and JavaScript courses, like JavaScript rollovers and how to use tables for HTML layout. And after I taught one of the courses, a guy came up to me and he worked out with my boss where I could work on give part of my time to work on the university's data warehouse. I mean, data warehouses are, socials, grades, financial information, all kinds, basically all the data, and it's all denormalized, right? So you get multiple copies of the same piece of data. So they asked me to work on the interface, and so they gave me a login to the project in progress and asked me, to start working on some layout ideas. Of course, the first thing I did was, look at Amazon, wanted to copy their table layout because they were using one back then. But I was curious about the authentication. I was like, well, how are they doing this authentication thing? And if you want to take yourself back to 2000, what was the state of web authentication?
Basic auth.
Basic digest auth, right? Cookies were kind of new, right? There's kind of a new thing called cookies. And so I was like, I'm curious how they're doing this login. And they gave me access to the app, and I just looked at the HTML source, and I logged in and I looked at the HTML source, and I'm looking and I'm like, oh, input hidden, type equals hidden, value equals, or name equals, user ID or username, and then my name, right? My user ID. So I logged out and then shut down my browser and then created a page on a floppy, the hard floppies, the 3.5 floppies, that just had a username and a submit, basically submitted into the inside of the app, and I was logged in. No password. So
that sounds about right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I took it down to the project lead's office, took the floppy down, and just walked up to him with the floppy and said, "You have a problem." And I showed him what was wrong, and to his credit, his first question you asked me was, "Can you get admin too?" Like, can you get admin access? I was like, probably in a few minutes, sure. So he was grateful. He didn't have me expelled or call the FBI or anything for computer hacking. He said, this stuck with me because he's like, you gave me something concrete for something we've all been debating about. Like, could this be a problem? Right. So you just gave me something I really needed. It's concrete. So, but back then, 2000, there weren't AppSec jobs around. There weren't. If you were in security, you were kind of, you were a little gray, pretty charcoal or dark, and you weren't looked at, so, it always remained a curiosity, but I just kept on doing development work. And so it was always kind of a curiosity for me as a developer, those things. And so around 2009, I had started working at a research center at the University of Maryland, and I had a boss who was real interested in security. And I guess the best way to say it is that we did research for the federal government, and so we consider ourselves a potential target. And I was responsible for all of our public web infrastructure and all the development that we did at the research center. So I became a little paranoid. He sent me to Sam's web penetration testing course, and immediately I came home and broke 3 of our apps.
Wait, so
sorry.
Just real quick, are you saying that you were still in the development side of the house and deving? Okay, so you're still deving infrastructure at this point,
right.
but your boss sends you to get some
Right.
security training because it's part of your
sort of a know your enemy type training, right? So I went to web app pen testing course so I could understand the things, understand the potential bad things that could happen, and then I could, so I could learn to defend against them. And so I became interested in it there. Like I said, immediately I came home and like found CSRF vulnerabilities, SQL injection, cross-site scripting, found all that stuff like right off the bat in a bunch of our apps. On top of that, I spent like, even before I went to that course, I spent a week just looking at things. And one of the things I found was the same resume. So they had built their own like resume acceptance system. I can't remember what they called it, but AIS or applicant information system or something. And what I found is they were taking everybody's, if you submitted like a PDF or a Word file as your resume, they took those and they renamed them, but they dropped them in a totally public directory.
And that's not a problem at all.
Because it's easier to just link to that file, right? Than like stream it out, verify you're authenticated, and then stream it out, right? So I took like a week and looked at a bunch of this stuff, and I went to my boss, and this is even before I did the web penetration testing course. And I was like, look, I got to stop this other stuff and fix these things. And so to his credit, he really supported me on all that. And then he also let me take a SANS pen testing course, the 560 course, which if you're an AppSec person, I wouldn't recommend taking that one first. I take the lower level course first. Because Ed SCOTUS is like, well, and if you look at this packet, you do this analysis, well, look what's obvious here. And I'm like, there's nothing obvious here looking at packets for me, man. I no.
Oh yeah, as a network layer, like
right?
Yeah, layer 3, layer 4, that's not.
Like it's obvious if you're Ed SCOTUS, but not obvious if you're me. So as I kind of, I looked at that, I thought, if I do security, it's the application side, obviously, I want to stay with. And so I jumped around some jobs after that, still doing development. But I went to jobs that gave me a lot of flexibility, like with professional development. Like one job gave me $2 and some $2.50 an hour for every hour I build, because we were contractors billing. And I got it into my own professional development fund, and I could basically go to whatever conferences or whatever I wanted. And so I went and finally got the the GX certification, the GWAPT, and started going to conferences, local OWASP conferences, and then went to AppSec USA. Just started networking, meeting people, got involved, started writing WebGoat, working on WebGoat. And that was about the time when 5.4 was like really just abandoned. And so there was a couple people that had come to Bruce that were interested, and we started to revive it. We should finally be releasing 8.0 soon. We've basically finished our overhaul that we started years ago. And so now we should have faster cycles in our releases after this. Should operative.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm going to put a link to that, by the way, because I actually didn't know that was very cool. Like a new release was coming out. I'm going to put that out.
Yeah, I'd go to put the GitHub link if that's what you have.
Yep, I'm going to put that. I put it in there right now.
Cool. Anyway, so I started working on that, and I've done almost nothing in the last year just because of life chaos, but that got me networked in further with other people. And so I kept going to different conferences. I actually went to LastCon, and that was actually when you were at Invisium, and I talked to Jack Menino there. I talked to a number of companies. Invisium was one of them, and they didn't work out. But when talking with Jack, I said, all these presentations are, from sort of the assessment, side of things, like the AppSec assessment side of things. I'm like, what do you think about a developer presenting, like developer angle of presentation on this? And so he said he thought it'd be a good idea, and that's when I did my first B-sides. Is the next spring. I think it was 2016 at that point. I presented it. It was a presentation called the Draining the AppSec Pond, B-sides Baltimore, B-sides Charm.
I'm finding the link, by the way. So that's if you're typing.
I have it somewhere. It might be. Yeah, I can find it if you can't.
Oh yeah, the part of is that. Yeah, well, I actually see it as part of the Modern Security series by Signal Sciences.
So that's a different one. That's a different presentation I did, but that's a similar angle. Sorry, I just looked at David Corsi's comment about being a backpack hoarder.
Yeah, I was going to mention something at some point because I was like, man, that is a lot of like you're very prepared if those are all go bags.
No, they're not. I wish I could.
A go bag for like a flood, a go bag for, you know.
No, I've got the actual backpacking bag. There it is. Yeah, that was my first presentation. Go easy on me. But yeah, so then
wait. Not all of ours are documented, so yeah.
It's funny because I actually never knew it had even been posted because someone asked for one, and I was like, oh, it never got posted because they never notified me. And somebody from work dug it out. I was like, oh, okay, it is there. But generally the idea being that, if you're draining a pond, there's an old proverb or whatever, riddle, whatever you want to call it, right? So if you got water flowing into a pond or a swamp and they give you a bucket, what's the first thing you should, you need to stop. You need to drain it. What's the first thing you should do?
So the question is, there's a pond, you need to drain
the pond.
Yeah,
and there's water flowing into that pond, just adding to the pool.
Oh, you got to stop the flow of water, yeah.
Right, so you got to stop the flow. And that was kind of the ideas, So do we want to spend our time, bailing, or do we want to spend more effort in stopping the flow in, right? So, because we're like, it's 2018. Why are we still seeing SQL injection? Because developers look at Stack Overflow and they see an example that works and it happens to be vulnerable and they copy and paste it and off we go. Done.
So you're saying that what we should do is, as security practitioners, blacklist. We
blacklist
Stack Overflow from being searched.
Or concentrate on taking that down before, right?
If you look in that other presentation, I actually cite the guy's research. It's called Secure Development Lessons from Insecure Applications. That's on the Modern Security series, and it's also the one I did at B-Sides here in Salt Lake. But I cite the guy. This guy did research, and he actually is live, so he's constantly polling Stack Overflow for all the PHP, MySQL, SQL injection vulnerable answers, like ones that are labeled as answers, right? Not just responses.
Green check mark.
Yeah, they got the one that if you click the link on Google, it takes you directly, scrolls you down directly to that one and does the little fade out and says, oh, this is what you want.
Google is so helpful. Actually, I would like to, let's see if we can dig that up and post it, because that's some pretty interesting research. I've seen it before. I remember when you talked about it at B-Sides, and it was like, I remember pulling it up being like, hey, this is sweet. It'd be really interesting to take it from PHP and like expand out from there. Right? I know he hit a lot of like the big ones that are there, but like even going as far as like how like Stack Overflow answers to like mobile development questions, like iOS and Android. There's so much that's on there. And, if I'm looking for something, I have to be very specific about, hey, guess what? I'm looking for Swift 4 because, I'll get back all these old Objective-C answers that half of them, number one, they don't work anymore. But the other problem is they're storing things insecurely and property lists, very much similar to what you see in the PHP space and SQL injection and everything else that goes along with it, right?
Yeah, and what's funny is you'll always look at some of those and it's somewhere else in the chain of responses. Someone's like, no, don't do that. That's insecure. But it's not marked as.
But it's like embedded. It's embedded like down underneath the comments, right?
It's way past the nice fade out that says this is your answer that you're looking for. Now you can go be productive.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's shoveled in there. It's usually like 1 or 2 sentences.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and that would be an interesting project in and of itself, right? Like, if you analyze that, you could probably like fingerprint that code and then go search GitHub, Ken, for that insecure like snippet, right, to see if it actually pops up. Yeah, some more data mining for you, right? Like one more project.
There you go.
Yeah, need more projects.
Let's see if I can find the link to that. It should be in my slide deck here, but I have to be able to like listen, talk, and find the slide deck at the same time. It might be a little challenging at this point in the day.
Yeah, welcome to my life on this podcast. I'm constantly trying to make sure I'm listening, but also finding links, and Seth same at times as well. We both kind of juggle doing that back and forth. This is not easy. It's probably one of the harder parts. That and just remembering scheduling stuff
remember to turn off your volume
video. Yeah, which by the way I didn't do this time, but that's because I got it right this time. But the only reason I got it right is because I forgot to even bring the video up this time. So I'm regressing worse than before.
So cool. So like talk a little bit about WebGoat, Jason. Cause like, you know, number one, how did you get involved with it, right? Because we're always getting questions from people about, like I want to get involved in application security or security in general, and you know, I want to code something and then present it, but like WebGoat's a pretty big name, right? Yeah. Did you just contact Robert? What was your Bruce, what was your path into that?
Yeah. So I mean, I just kind of went and looked at the OWASP projects. I mean, what was happening at the time was, I mean, there's a number of blog posts out there that talk about, you want to get into security, and they talk about what you should do to get into security. And the general list is, you know, network, right? Get to know people, get involved with a project. That's almost always on the list, you know, and just, you know, do things that you can do to learn and get involved in network, right? And so that one of, well, go find a project, that's when I said, okay, well, let me go find a project. And I went out on OWASP because I was somewhat familiar with OWASP at the time. And you know, I'd seen some of their projects before. I had, in 2009, I had used WebScarab. Any guys remember that?
Hey, that was my go-to for a long time. But that was up until about like 2000 and I want to say like 5. It was around for a long time after that.
2009, yeah. It was still a little old. It's already a little old.
Well, and then around the WebScarab time, there was also that. Do you guys remember that brief? It was called, I want to say it was like Cat Proxy or something like that. I don't know if you guys remember that, but it's like
Paris Proxy was the other one at the time that I used it.
There was a C# Cat Proxy.
You're seeing that, and I remember something for Windows. Yeah, Fiddler for Windows or for IE, right? You know, because it plugged into IE pretty nicely. If you had to be on Windows and didn't have Java, but yeah, I remember something with a cat, but I don't remember what it was. Ken, I didn't use it. Like I might have downloaded it once, and then we went back to WebScarab or Burp at the time, right? So
Context App Tool, I think, is here's the link from 2010 and when it was released, brand new. So it was after you said WebScarab in 2009. You're still using it. This would have been 2010. Let me put that in there. But yeah, this was, for a while I experimented with this one, and then because you know what's funny is that people are always like, you know, I'm using this, I'm using that, and I'm always like, shit. I feel like I've tried most of them, and I always go back to Burp. Always go back to it.
Yeah.
So I tried to use that. I tried to use that law to find my link. I still haven't found it yet. We'll keep trying. So WebScarab and Paris were the options in my class in 2009. Anyway, as far as WebGoat goes, so I went to AppSec USA in New York, 2013. That was kind of the first app. I'd been to an apps, I want to say it was AppSec DC in 2010 or so. But you know, so that's when I was like looking around, wondering what I should get into, and basically looked at the projects and said, look, I know JavaScript, I know Java. I can actually just start contributing to this project right now, right? I don't need to go learn a bunch of new stuff. You know, I'm a developer. I can do development, and heck, I can write vulnerable code. It's even easier, right? I don't even have to care that much. Actually, though, I think, and that's part of my other presentation, is I think actually there's writing vulnerable code is sometimes, in some ways, harder. For one, now sometimes, like we have to turn off the secure defaults, right? Like HTTP only. I had the Stack Overflow Google. You know, I Googled how do I turn off HTTP only in Spring, right? And the guy, someone had posted on Stack Overflow, how do I do this? And he posted in this question, I know it's a bad idea, et cetera. He had a very specific purpose because he knew everyone was going to say, don't do it. So, yeah. but we have to turn off, we have to turn on DTDs, we have to turn on entity processing, stuff like that. But the tricky part is like, you want to actually let the vulnerability happen and then detect it after the fact, right? You don't want to do magic string comparisons. Oh, you put in a tick, you know, single quote or 1 = 1 semicolon space dash dash space, right? You don't want to like be like, oh, that string matches exactly. Yay, you win SQL injection, right? And that's part of my presentation when I talk about, you know, the secure development lessons, right? Like an app knows when it's compromised. But let's take that one step further. If you know when you're compromised, don't wait until then. Right? Now you can move over from there, but you can use that for testing, right? So if you're I remember writing my first app that actually involved an authentication at the University of Maryland. It actually involved like logging people in and managing users in a database. And I'm writing the query for it, and that query was probably injectable, you know.
Yeah.
But I remember specifically writing in that query, if when the user logs in and we query them from the database, if I get more than one user, I actually alerted. I actually had like, it emailed me, right? If I got 2 users on a login, it would email me because that means I have, you know, and we always talk about CIA and application security. Man, I had an integrity problem. My data was bad. Right? Something had happened. I had a collision or something was wrong with my data. Right? And so I just remember thinking through that and being like, well, I should never get 2 users. Right? But this query theoretically could. Right? I didn't do just like a top 1 or limit 1 on my query, you know, which I could have done. But yeah, I just remember thinking through that and going, well, what would happen here? So anyway, yeah, so I got involved in WebGoat, and we do, basically we present different topics, you know, basically vulnerability topics. We talk through what they are, and then we provide the opportunity to exploit them. And then we try to also spend time now more so with WebGoat to like talk about remediations, right, and mitigations you can do on those. And I think, you know,
I mean, that was, I mean, initially, like I remember first getting into WebGoat, and that was one of my like complaints, right? It was like, oh, look, here's this vulnerability, but it was, to your point from earlier, it was very assessment focused, right? Hey, I want to be able to detect SQL injection. This is the behavior. And then it would be like, yeah, you got to check your input and do parameterized queries. And then they'd move on, right? It wasn't a lot of like real like developer level language. And
yeah. And so we're trying to do more of that.
So to your credit, yeah, I'll be interested to see what 8.0 looks like then along those lines.
I mean, you can essentially pull it now. We've essentially been at 8 for a long time. It's just we've never made it a release official. So it's easier for people to contribute lessons now, but we also have to watch like the quality of what is contributed. So somebody actually put in a deserialization lesson recently, which I'm really interested in. But he didn't provide us with so I contacted him. He said he's going to get me an example payload because I suck at deserialization on the offensive side. It's not an easy thing. I mean, it's, you know. So,
yeah, no, it's not. I mean, if you, there are certainly some like known payloads for, but I mean, that's just part of like contributing to a project in general. Is if you're going to write the vuln, you got to write the payload, you got to write the remediation, you have to give like a good explanation of it all. I mean, at least that's what I would require.
Yeah, and that's that's kind of what I went back to him and said, hey, you know, number one, I'd like to be able to use it and play with it. Two, you know, for general quality lessons, we need that. And you guys have done a real good job. You know, having looked over the WebGoat wiki recently, you know, I was really impressed with the wiki write-ups that you do there. And I was like, oh, we might steal that idea.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that was it was helpful for doing when you give training, like, because I know people have used it to give. I know used it to give free training, like open source training. So it's helpful for those.
Well, I use it when you know, I use it for training. I use WebGoat and I use other stuff for training, and so yeah, I have an interest in that part as well. So yeah, so I just started contributing, and it's a slow burn, you know, where everybody's doing it kind of on their own time or when their job lets them do it. So Nana Bars is he's joined on the project a year or two after I did, and he's from the Netherlands, and he's just been doing fantastic work. He really replumbed it for us, like finished kind of the last part of the rewrite that needed to be done, and he's been adding great stuff to it. So he actually built a companion app for it now called WebWolf.
Oh yeah.
So like when you want to do, it comes with it. So when you want to do CSRF or like session fixation or something like that, where you have to email or it requires an external component. So WebWolf is there to handle the external component. So like if you want to phone home a cookie, like you could phone home a cookie to WebWolf. So
cool. So similar to kind of what Burp Collaborator does for us when we're doing assessments, but all within the context of WebGoat. Yeah. No, well, that's pretty cool, man.
So yeah, Nana really deserves the credit for any recent developments. I've been just trying to keep my head above water, still be involved somehow. So, but yeah, so back to kind of the path there. That was part of the path, you know, and then so I started going to more OWASP events. I went to AppSec USA in Denver, and then I went to StConza. That's when I talked with Jack. And then actually that presentation you posted, the one at B-Sides Charm, that was like the week before I started at Aztec. So like I got accepted to present at B-Sides Charm, and in the interim I worked out the job with Aztec. And so I've been there a little over 2 years now, just staring at other people's code.
Yeah, I mean, how is that to go from building stuff to breaking stuff?
It's, you know, I don't do a lot of breaking. I do a lot of review. I do a lot of review and training. I really enjoy the training. I love working with developers because having been a developer for 15 plus years, like I feel their pain. You know, I think I'm more sympathetic security wise as a security consultant than I was as a developer, because, you know, I think back to my experience, and now if I come in and say, well, you need to fix all this, they've got all their normal load and everything else, and, you know, they don't want to do it. Whereas when I was a developer that was security focused, I was like, come on, you guys suck, fix this.
Yeah.
Stop introducing security vulnerability.
Well, so what's the difference in your mind between breaking and review?
I guess, well, so I do a lot of static code review, right? So I'm only breaking the app in my head, right? So we run SAST, I weed out false positives, I look manually for things that could happen, and I explain those, you know, but I'm not actually getting my hands on and proving that that's happening. And sometimes it's a no-brainer, right? So if I see, certain things are command injection or certain SQL injection vulnerabilities, cross-site scripting, some of those are no-brainers, right? But then sometimes I'm sitting there like for an hour or more, just trying to noodle if this could happen, right? And under what scenario it could happen. And usually if I find myself going on too long about that, then that's a sign to me that there's not really risk there, right?
Yeah, I have a hard time communicating that with a lot of people, right? That like the amount of time it actually takes to find vulnerabilities in code. It's like, yeah, you can run a SaaS tool, you can run Fortify or something against it, and it may identify some things, but usually you're going to have to trace that. A lot of those are going to be false positives, and they're going to be fairly obvious to you pretty quickly. But all the interesting vulnerabilities, man, it it takes some brain power, and it takes like actually mapping that out. Ken and I were talking about this recently, right? Is that the vulnerabilities that I find that actually I uncover are because I follow a process, right? It's not because I like look at this file and jump around all over the place. It's because like I map out, hey, look, here are all my endpoints. Here is everything that I like. This is what it interacts with. This is how it interacts with the model, and it gets written to the database, right? And like starting to identify those different pathways, it takes time.
Because we were having a conversation about like at what point does I remember that it was like yesterday or the day before we were having this conversation about talent versus process, and because we were just I remember that we were like, because I think one of us was like, thinking about it, we are fine for the things we find, like it's not because we're super elite hackers or anything like that. You do it over and over and over and over and over again. You codify that. Like that was the big part of it, is we were talking about codifying and having a process and then just following that and then fine tuning and basically having a game plan every time you go and do an assessment. That's, I mean, we were talking about, we both agree it's far more valuable than being like, it's definitely cool to chain stuff together. And certainly we have that skill set too. I'd like to put that out there. We're pretty good hackers, but it really comes down to like just following a process, because you can be really smart and not follow a process and miss a bunch of shit. So,
well, that was, I mean, that harkens back to like our discussion with Jason Haddix as well, right? On the bug bounty stuff. Like he has like a methodology that he follows and that he releases. And he always says, yeah, usually when I start something, I'm like, oh, and I like poke around and I can't find anything. And I think that we've got that whole graph about how you start a pen test and you feel like, hey, maybe there's some stuff here. And then you reach that like valley where it's, oh, I just completely suck, right? And then that's the point that he's like, wait a second, I have a methodology that I should be following. And he starts to follow that. And all of a sudden, oh, here's a vulnerability, here's a vulnerability, here's a vulnerability. It's that codification. It's that learning that it's not just, hey, everything's not going to come out in the first 10 minutes of me looking at code. It's just not, right? Or doing an assessment or whatever it is.
Yeah, and you can't. One of the biggest things I can tell people is that you cannot do a successful code review without thoroughly understanding what the purpose, not just the purpose of the application in a general sense, but of each piece of functionality you're reviewing. Like, what is its purpose? What is its intention? And if you can't figure that out first, you're going to have a hard time doing the rest of your code review.
That's one of my big frustrations, actually. And a lot of times I won't get that information in a code review because it's kind of handed off, and we don't always have direct contact with developers. And so I get it, but it doesn't enumerate endpoints, right? So it's when I find myself looking down in some DTO code 3 layers down, right? Some data model code that's 3 layers down, nowhere near a controller, nowhere near an endpoint. And I'm looking at this, and Fortify is telling me, oh, there's a vulnerability, and then I'm like, no, why am I down here? Right? Let me go back to that.
It's using SHA-1, bro. Yeah. Everything critical.
So, wait, it had the word password in there. Oh my gosh.
No context.
The best. The best. I honestly just threw something at one of the, I won't call it the vendor, but one of the SaaS products. And it came back and it's like, ooh, this has like keys all over in it, and it's because they're like using key value stores, right? I'm like, oh man, like you got like 500 of these in like 1,000 lines of code.
But then you're
killing me, right?
But then just to mass say it's not an issue,
you can't.
You can't. Now you've got to look at them all, and that's just So to go back to your original question, Ken, about building versus doing that, I mean that's why I like doing the training, because I get hands-on, right, and I get to build out a little bit of my own stuff, and I get to configure some other stuff. So like one thing that I've started doing in my training more recently is I actually run like an hour or 3-hour CTF with the developers at the end. And so I use CTFD and vulnerable app, and and they love it, right? Now, I really want to go in the direction of, have you guys seen the new thing that came out, the remediate the flag? So someone, Sharif Mansour and some other people were involved in a discussion with OWASP. Some developer had created this thing. Let me see if I can. It's in the OWASP Slack.
Theflag.net.
Maybe.
Yeah, there's an open source platform that's out on GitHub.
Yeah, and it's on GitHub now. I haven't really had a chance to look at it, but that's the direction like I want to go. If you look at my tweet history, actually, I retweeted it in there from, I think, Cody Wood or somebody. I'll find it here.
I mean, it's pretty new, right? For
Right,
sure.
it's pretty new. They talked to me. It was almost a year ago more because they were trying to get it was me and some other people were on an emails. They were trying to see if this developer would bring the project under the OWASP banner, right? Open source it and bring it under the OWASP banner. And then I didn't hear anything about it for a long time. And then I saw this tweet. Like I said, I think it's from Cody Wood. I went to the wrong.
Oh yeah, because he presented about it. Here, I'll throw the GitHub up there. He presented about it at AppSec EU. So
yeah,
like,
that's right.
Definitely, getting there.
You found it?
Yeah, I did. I just threw it in the general chat.
I just found it too.
SK4.
No, that's Scatty, I guess. His handle on GitHub. So I mean, that's like where I'd like to be with developers, like doing labs. Is like, all right, my dreams training is I've got this vulnerable code and I've got unit tests and integration and functional tests that show that it's broken, right? And you need to get the build to pass because the build is going to fail if the vulnerabilities are present, right? And that's what I would like to have is like build the code so that it works, then break it with some vulnerabilities, but have the unit tests and integration tests. And now their challenge is to actually fix it, remediate it, But for now, developers enjoy breaking stuff, and I think there's still value to that, to have developers break stuff and understand how it happens.
Well, there's quite a few others of those that are, similar to that. I mean, Ken and I worked on a platform at one point, something similar, right? And it goes back to your point of, you really want to, you really want to learn about a vulnerability, like go code it insecurely, right? Try and get Django or, Flask or what have you to pop an XSS vulnerability and the protections that you have to turn off and actually what it's doing under the hood to protect against that, right?
Yeah.
And then, actually go and code that, right? If you want to teach a developer, have them actually write some code and change some code and fix the project. But then, like you start talking about the CI/CD portion of that and write a test to detect whether or not something is vulnerable to cross-site scripting, because you're almost at that point writing your own scanner, right? Your own application scanner. It's very custom. I mean, this goes back to like I gave a sputter, like a talk about security.
Yeah, I remember testing. Your sputter thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's very, very similar to that, right? Is that's the whole idea is you want to do that, and it's a hard problem to solve. It's not trivial. No. So,
but I think from a developer training level, that's what I would like to see, so they could see it, they could fix it. But I think certain areas there's things that scanners are never going to get, and one of my favorite areas of that is like access control. And I think that's the place you can write your own integration and unit and functional tests to test that. In fact, I did that kind of like to come to my last year of getting into the AppSec industry, I was frustrated because, I had spent all this money on conferences and, I was working on WebGoat and, people were either offering me like entry-level money or it wasn't working out for whatever reason. It wasn't always, it's a tough thing to change lanes, right? In your job, it's not easy. And I think sometimes people gloss over that, right? I have a friend who stopped doing one thing and now he's a dentist. He had to go to 4 years of school, I mean.
Yeah, especially if you have wife and kid, or a husband or wife, and you have kids, responsibilities.
Yeah. So I just decided in that last year, I said, hey, I'm just going to do security in my job. I'm writing code. I'm gonna do security in my job and figure out how to do it here, because then I can take that out with me whenever, if this ever works out, right? Maybe I just decide to stay here. And so, like came onto this project, and it's this developer. He's like 17 years Java experience. Like his code was perfectly formatted, like one space between methods, method ending, method starting, like indents perfect. Almost looked like Python, right? So it was really nicely formatted. And I'm like, I'm worried I'm gonna like mess it up. But then I'm like, oh, I'm looking through this. Oh, look, there's an iDoor. Yeah, I can, yeah. So there was like shareable objects, and he, in our development system, he shared one to me. So I had one, when I got started on the project, and I was like, oh yeah, when I do a put, I'll just change the owner ID to my ID. Oh, yep, that's mine now. Thanks. And I'll unshare it from him. Oh, okay. Yep, totally. Yeah. You're out. You're closed out. And so like I brought that up. Everyone acknowledged it. They said, yeah, and the answer was like, I felt bad. I went to apologize later because I could have stand up. I brought it up, and I was like, I didn't mean to throw you under the bus. And he's like, no, you're right. It's something we should do. And his answer was, I just didn't think anyone would do that. I didn't think any of our users would do that.
Yeah. It happens.
So, and so I went and wrote like an access, we had to kind of retrofit in access control now, which is always harder at this point. And so we rigged it in, but then once that was done, we had functional testing running in a Groovy stack, Jeb and Spock. And so I went and built a bunch of REST calls, I had to mock users, and then I had to, it wasn't easy, but once I had it in there, it was in there. And now we have that testing for good, right? So it would, test, if I owned an object, I could view it, I could modify it. And if you owned an object but hadn't shared it to me, well, I couldn't view it, right? So it ran through a whole series of those scenarios and tests. So
yeah, I mean,
it requires the training, right? I mean, and that's what you're working through, right? Is like they have to know about it to be able to write those tests. Like any problem with your application or any like functional test with the application is typically broken down to something fairly easy to identify and write if you know that it exists.
Yeah.
Seth, didn't you give a whole course on writing security-centric unit tests or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have in the past, right? Like, we stepped through a sputter and we kind of went through each of the different vulnerabilities and how you would mock that out. Right. Like, I mean, Sputter's kind of a generic framework for that, but there's like, it's very easy to like use unit tests for any of the different languages to do that. You don't necessarily have to use, something that's generic, right? If you've already got your test framework that's set up, especially with the objects. I mean, the hardest thing about that is, hey, you've got to mock everything up. But once it's there and it's in place, it's just a matter of writing a couple extra unit tests to actually check for, input handling and for authentication and authorization checks. They're not that difficult.
And that's the hardest part of all that, like you said, is mocking it up, getting the plumbing set so that you can run those tests. And once you have that, well, you're going to copy paste and write different scenarios, right? So that's really where the hard work is. So if you've got a functional testing or an integration testing environment, that most of that hard work's done, right? It's getting that set up that's hard. To your point about,
I mean, it just goes back to my.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I mean, it just goes back to my like I say it in all of my tests when I start, I get up there, is that most of the security, like application security professionals or testers, are just glorified QA testers.
Yeah.
You're doing an integration test. That's all it is. It's just a very specialized skill set and a specialized subset of payloads that they're sending. But, most of the QA testers would write, circles around them as far as like actual test plans and how that's actually done.
Right. So in the ideal sort of software development lifecycle, I'd have the AppSec guy sit down with the QA automator and, okay, well, this is how to write a payload. The other guy knows how to do, actually get the testing run. So, I mean, like to your point earlier about writing your own scanner, I mean, so there's certain things I would do in like in my own testing, but things, like I said, we already have things that are pretty good at finding certain vulnerabilities, right? So some of the SaaS products are pretty good at SQL injection or cross-site scripting and other things. But I would still, there's no reason if I have a centralized method that does, encoding or output, I mean, now it's mainly framework driven. But let's say I wrote my own cross-site scripting and encoding for whatever reason. I wrote my own crypto. Yay. So
that's always a good idea.
What do I say? Yeah, that's always a good idea. Yeah.
If anyone listening doesn't understand, didn't catch that, that was there was sarcasm tags around all of that. But anyway, but yeah, I mean, but that's where, if you're writing something security centric that is in your code, write your own unit test for it, right? Because the scanner's not going to know your policy, your method, for that. So if you are writing your own security code, you do need to write your own unit test for it. That's kind of where I'd put it, for the standard stock things that SaaS is good at. Yeah, let SaaS do it. Put it in your CI and let it do it. So,
I mean, even as much as you can automate some of the DAST stuff as well, the dynamic scanning,
right.
I mean, it makes sense. There's a lot of time constraints to go with that, especially in a CI/CD pipeline, right? Integration tests take forever as it is, and if you add, 30 to 40% because you're running like one of those external SaaS tools, guess what? That may or may not work with somebody that's deploying on a hourly or every other hour basis, right? So it's like that's where you want to write your own, right? That's what I'm saying about test plans and actually how that's executed, right? If you can scope that down to, hey, this is input handling. I don't need to know about a full cross-site scripting vulnerability. I just need to know about these 4 or 5 characters. You can cut a lot of that out. Really,
I need to know that my regex works the way I intend it to.
Yep.
Most of that is just quality software. That's a thing I harp on sometimes is, secure software in most cases is just quality software, right? I expect all numbers. I get all numbers. I make sure that I get all numbers, things like that, simple things like that. So,
cool.
Yeah.
Well, man, I like that. I don't know. Ken and I always say like the hour goes by really quick.
Yeah, I was just looking at like 5:30 already. So sorry for the late start. I appreciate you guys accommodating that.
Hey, no Rappy, you joined.
Yeah, it's been a good discussion. I'm glad to hear some other like development discussions going on, right? Sometimes we get further away from the code itself, right? And it's no knock on the people that are coming on. It's just like depends on the background that people have,
right?
But along those lines, right? Like any like final thoughts or recommendations that you have about a developer getting into application security. I mean, it sounds like your path, it took a little while, and I think I remember talking to you during that time frame, and I know you were frustrated with it, right?
Yeah, you were one of the earlier people. I don't know. We connected on Twitter. I'm trying to remember. But yeah, we connected on Twitter a while back, and anyway, repeat your question. I kind of got.
I was going to say, like, what would you recommend to some like a developer that is looking to make that change? Like, how would you recommend that they go about that?
So, I mean, I think I'd understand. I mean, it almost goes parallel with your comment about CI/CD and like how long tests take, right? It's kind of just a joke running. It's like I've had with some other people, like, well, I just want to learn to be patient now, right?
Yep.
I just want patience now, right? And so I think you have to understand that it does take time. Changing lanes does take effort and time, right? And there was literally a point where I just was like, okay, I guess I'm just going to do development from here on out, And so I'll just be a secure developer, and that's what it is. And there are days where I think I'll go back and be a secure developer. I think I'd like to build stuff more. And so, but it's so you have to understand. You have to be serious about it. This is, I think, my first bit, and you'll find out if you're serious about it through the process. But otherwise, I really can't go away from that list that blogs. So many people have blogged about, right? Go find a project. find a project that but find a project that intersects at least partially, if not mostly, with your skills, right? Because then it's more of what we'd call, I think the behavioral economists economists call it a nudge, right? So it's a small change. You're not having this huge, amount of learning you have to do to get involved. But get involved. OWASP is a great organization. I think I'd really like to see. Recently, it seems like their projects have really gotten a lot more support, and sort of activity level. So that's good. I don't know if you guys have other recommendations of organizations or projects to get involved with. I know there's other good ones out there. It's just OWASP has been my main contact so far with AppSec. Yeah, and you guys have talked about this before on the other things. If you learn something, go ahead and blog about it. It may help somebody else, but it's going to help you, and it's also going to give you some artifact to your credentialing, right?
So go on Stack Overflow and just answer questions insecurely. That's
go be that guy. Three responses down saying, no, don't do that.
Do not do this.
Honestly,
I think we could almost automate that, right? If you can identify those like automatically that they're there, maybe they can just flag it somehow. I don't know.
That sounds like a fun project. I don't know. You have to acronym it somehow with curmudgeon though.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
fast acting curmudgeon trailer. Like we can make it fact. You can work at fact again.
Yeah. Now we got an acronym within an acronym, so like kind of like GNU is not Unix. But yeah, so I mean, that's the thing. I think, my path, I think, is a little different because I was like a curmudgeonly old developer, older developer, not dead yet. And so when I would talk to places, they're like, yeah, you're not our typical, because usually we get developers who've been, like AppSec places would get developers who've been working 2 to 5 years maybe in development, and then they bring them into the AppSec space, right? Whereas I had been 15 years or so, and so I think mine's a little different, but I mean, you have to be willing to put in that investment. And networking was really key for me, although despite having done all the networking, funny story here, just to cap it off, maybe. The Aztec job, I went to LastCon, and they had a whiteboard. That was the job board. And so there was all kinds of people would just write, their company name, maybe positions they were looking for, or a URL. And of course, there was a few URLs with like question mark, something, tick, or 1=1, or cross-site scripting payload written on them. But literally, I just took out my phone, took a picture of that job board, and I think Aztec was the one table I didn't visit at the conference. And then I went home and I looked at that picture, and this was kind of my low point, frustrated point. And I'm like, all right, I'm just going to look at some of these and send them out. And I sent Aztec an email, and then, a few interviews later, next thing I know, I've got an offer. Didn't know anybody. But in the long term, the networking is really big. I mean, like I said, I met you. I want to say it was like 2014 or 15 we connected probably initially.
I'm trying to think if we met each other like face to face at like AppSec USA out in DC or something.
No, I remember it was Twitter. If I go back to, I could probably even look it up, probably the actual date on Twitter.
But that's just it, right? Like it's it is important.
Yeah, it's important, especially for the long term. And then I kind of like your first, one thing I've kind of had to realize is, it's almost like having your first job again. When you get there, you have to understand you're going to be in an environment that's different from what you've done before, right? And so all those things you did before aren't part of your day to day. You've got to get used to it. I had to get used to working remote in this case, which, has a lot of upsides, has, occasional downsides too. as you guys know. So,
Yep.
15-year-olds
Cool.
that knock on the door, walk in, start asking the question before you've said just a minute.
Yeah. You're like, wait, I'm on a call. Yeah.
Yeah, I get the dad, I'm stuck on Minecraft. Can you help me?
Yes, you can. Cool. Well, yeah, Jason, we appreciate you coming on, man. It's been a good discussion. Any final thoughts before we kind of wrap things up?
In any particular vein?
That's it. No. I'm like, where are you speaking anywhere in the near future that people could,
where can people meet you? Where are you going to be out and about? Or even if you're just somewhere?
Honestly, this last year has just kind of been, we moved twice. And by the way, if you're thinking about moving twice within a 12-month span, I mean, this would be my parting advice. Don't do it.
I don't think that was ever something I was planning on doing.
Right. Only people like me do that sort of stuff. Anyway, long story there, but yeah, that kind of took a lot of my energy. On top of a month after the first move, I crashed my bike. I hit rumble strips at 40 miles an hour and busted my shoulder and thumb up. So it kind of took out my conference energy. I did B-sides, but that was it this last year. So I'm just now kind of starting to put my head up and look around at things. So I think I'll look at StCon. I'll be involved somehow, Seth, with Hack West this year. So feel free to poke me about that.
Yeah. Yeah, we will.
Yeah, so that'd be my parting advice. Don't move twice in 1 year.
Sweet. We'll put that as the tagline for the episode.
That's the title.
No, I mean, yeah. But thanks for coming on, Jason. Outside of that, those of you that listen to us regularly know that we will be teaching a course on secure code review practices. Seth and Ken's excellent adventures, right, in code review.
Yeah, excellent adventures in code review.
Are you going to have the
adventures in code review?
Are you going to have the whole Bill and Ted thing going on? Like, which is Bill, which is Ted, or anything like that?
Sure. Why not? Right.
Got to figure that out.
We'll have a phone booth. That's all we're saying.
You'll probably be like me, in my training where I have like Star Trek references. Like I have McCoy. I have a meme that says, damn it, Jim, I'm a developer, not a pen tester. Where I talk about using a proxy, and like nobody gets it. I'm like, everyone's too young. Like, really?
Yeah.
I know. They'll probably be like, I don't get it. You guys had some excellent adventures.
Yeah,
fantastic.
Exactly. Yeah.
Why is Keanu Reeves up there?
Maybe we should make that a requirement. Like people have to watch it before they show up at the course. Otherwise, it's like, okay, you go sit for 2 hours and watch it, and then we can dive in.
Why is John Wick on the PowerPoints?
Yeah.
We should mention. So we've got because we've got that going on at AppSec USA, and then the next week we're out in Australia.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I'm super thrilled about it. It's gonna be
fun. Yeah,
good time. Next week we've got Scott Piper on, by the way. So he wrote flaws.cloud. So he's going to drop a bunch of AWS knowledge on. I think AWS is basically his life at this point. So
another Utah connection.
Yeah.
Oh, is he out in Utah?
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he was at Hack West. Scott's a good guy. So
nice.
It'll be cool. Yeah. So join us next week, and we'll talk AWS and push more into that, I guess, cloud development at that point.
Well, thanks again, Jason, for joining us, and don't drop off now that we're because I always have to say that so that people don't drop off immediately. Seth, anything else?
Nope, that's everything from me. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see everyone next week with Scott.
Later.